You have to be ready if there's a problem. They call you. Are you working on call? Nice, nice. Do you think on call sucks? That is my last question. Okay, me too. I think on call sucks a bit at least. Uh, so, well, even the most reliable services fail, and I'm not just talking about like services with 5, 6, or 9 nines. If that is something like, I don't know if that's real or not, but we all know these famous stories. But I'm going to tell you a different story about a service that our lives depend on, 911. So 911 had several incidents over the years, and in 2014, on a June morning in Washington, wireless 911 E9, or they call it E911's IT manager was alerted. Basically, it is used to call 911 through wireless phones. And a man had been trying to reach out 911, and he couldn't get through. So, like after a couple of tries, he was able to call 911 by borrowing someone else's phone. So, they tried to spot the problem, and they realized that it is only happening for a specific telecom provider. And they tried to reach out to the telecom provider, but they couldn't. The problem is only solved after hours later without a response from the telecom provider, and they had no idea what happened. And in 2018, just last year, another problem with 911, again E911. But this time, the communications company, basically the cloud company that all those telecom providers use, had a big outage. For over a day, 911 was down for many regions in America. And again, there was nothing that they could do. So obviously not every situation is this dangerous or this stressful, but incidents are happening. So basically that is why, like, no matter how much you invest in resilience, there are going to be incidents like this one. So that means we have to have on-call people. We have to have people, waiting to be called if there's a problem. We need people to respond to these emergencies. There's no slide, so it's okay. But as you guys, and also I'm thinking the same, on-call sucks in many ways if you are not prepared enough, if you don't invest in on-call enough. And it's not the most fun thing if you can't, go to the beach without carrying your laptop, or if you get up in the 2 a.m. in the middle of the night, trying to spot a problem and fix it. And actually, research backs this up. So, researchers from the University of Hamburg did a research with 132 people on the effect of extended work availability, and they found out that, and also, so basically what they did is they collected daily surveys for 4 days, during which people need to be available outside of work hours, and during 4 days, people basically didn't need to be available outside of work hours. And also 51 of them, they collected cortisol level samples, basically the hormone that people, we use for measuring stress level. And what they found was pretty interesting. So the results revealed that on-call isn't leisure time. Even if they don't get called, it was affecting them. It was affecting their start of the day mood, as well as their cortisol awakening response. So basically, research proves that on-call, no matter what, is stressful. So that is why we have to acknowledge this fact and invest more in on-call to keep our people healthy. And on the other hand, famous researcher from Stanford University, I'm not sure if you are familiar with him in his talks, he's famous, Robert Sapolsky. So in one of his talks, he talked about this stress is actually not being a bad thing in many situations. So he lists 3 main conditions for stress to be not to be bad and actually be useful. So the first one is it has to be moderately useful, moderately stressful, not too much stress. In 911 case, no matter what you do, it's going to be stressful because people's life depends on it. But in this case, for example, it's okay because the power brings back on fast. Even if it doesn't, we can continue. We could have some backups. And also, stress has to be something transient. And he gives the example that there's a reason that we don't have roller coaster rides going on for 3 weeks. So it has to be something transient. If it's happening all the time, obviously it's going to be stressful. It's going to affect your life. And lastly, I think this one is more relevant in our case, with my talk. It has to be occurring in a context that overall feels safe. And that is why we have to get ready. We have to invest in on-call and basically get ready for the bad day. And as the software development industry, we started investing a lot more in resilience, especially with DevOps coming through. And we started doing small iterations and automating a lot of things. And Atlassian did a survey with 500 IT professionals, and what they found is that 58% of teams report fewer outages and bugs after they adopted CI/CD solutions. And obviously, things like automation, nowadays we talk about chaos engineering and all that observability stuff, so all those things help a lot. But especially with the microservices, we started breaking things into small parts and empowering teams. So basically, we started investing more in microservice architectures. But microservices weren't easy. So just building CI/CD pipelines and automating things weren't enough. So we took the idea of empowering teams one step further. Dr. Wagner Vogel's Amazon CTO, so also today's keynote talk, there was this "you build it, you run it" sentence. So this changed our industry for the good. So this changed our mentality on how we develop software, how we operate software. And nowadays, we see everyone following this idea, including like big companies like Amazon, Netflix, Atlassian, or all kind of companies like mid-sized, small startups. Everyone is following this idea. So today, DevOps is not just expecting ops people to write more code. DevOps is also expecting developers to do more operations stuff. And as Opsgenie, when we were 15 people way before Atlassian acquisition in the engineering team, we had only 2 on-call during nights. Basically, they were our co-founders, so they were taking all the on-call responsibilities. But after we basically had to scale our engineering team after some point as we grow fast. And after we became more than 15 people, basically one day he came and I'm not going to be able to do this anymore because he's getting all those alerts, but sometimes he doesn't know how to fix them because it's just scaled and there are multiple services now. He can't really know everything, and also he's getting up middle of the night a couple of times. So it becomes more stressful for our co-founders. And at that point, we decided to start putting people on call during night as well. But before that, we had on-call people during day. And at that moment, we decided to, as we scale, we decided to put our people on call during night as well. So this helped us in many ways, and I'd like to talk about 3 important ways that this putting developers on call helps. So first of all, we have ever-increasing demands. We have increasing demands around availability, reliability, security. It's not just a competitive advantage anymore, it's a requirement because our users expect this. And the only way that we can provide these demands is if we have the most qualified people ready to fix these problems. And most of the time, the developers of these services are the most qualified people, and they can solve problems faster because they know ins and outs of all those services better than anyone else. So this is the first reason. Basically, it helps speed up the incident response process. And also being on call enables developers to experience the problems in the first hand. And that was one of the basic fundamental problems with DevOps. Basically, operations engineers were taking all those chore work and doing all the things, but developers didn't care. But once developers get paid and they get up in the middle of the night, and then they start caring. they start caring about things like unit testing, basically testing in general, monitoring, instrumentation, or alerting, because now it is their problem as well. And the last one, I think we often miss this one, but at the time, back at the days, when management think that operations were responsible for like reliability, basically, they didn't care much. If there's a problem, they basically just tell them, do your job better. But when they see developers spending time on those, basically chore work, basically they couldn't produce business logic and just working on something that isn't really bringing any benefit to the table. And then they see like they need to invest more in resilience, and they can prioritize resilience work and reliability work easily because now they have the data. Now they can actually have the reason to invest more in resilience. So it also helps business and developers' incentives better, because developers ask if we can spend like couple of weeks on making our applications more resilient at some tests, but most of the time management like isn't on board. But this definitely helps because now you have the data and how it is affecting your developers. So now let me share a personal story with you. So it was about 5 p.m. on Friday evening. So we worked on this feature for 2 weeks, more than 2 weeks. It was about how we index. So basically, Opsgenie is an alerting and incident management solution, and we have this, homepage, let's say, alerting page that we list all the alerts that you can query different alerts. And we did a huge refactor, basically affecting this page, and this page is coming from Elasticsearch. And obviously, we worked on this 2 days, and we couldn't make it until Monday, so we shipped it at 5 p.m. on Friday. And again, like if there is one lesson you're going to take from this presentation, let it be the fact that you should never ever ship code on Friday, at least, especially not on 5 p.m. But sometimes we still do this, even though we had this problem. So again, the feature was about how we index our data to Elasticsearch. And well, we did a lot of testing. So we checked production, everything is going well. We are checking dashboards. After 10 minutes, we were ready to go home. And then we got a couple of reports from customers to our customer service team. There's something wrong. They are acknowledging alerts. They are closing alerts, but it's not disappearing. Like it's there, like it's not closed. So our customer success team basically tried the same thing, and they were also able to replicate the problem. And what they do at that moment is they use our Slack application and page the on-call team for the alerting, responsible for the alerting page, like saying something like /Genie, there's a problem with the how we show alerts. And that page is the on-call engineer for the alerting team. And on-call engineer, at that moment, we still don't know if there's a problem or not. At that moment, on-call engineer started looking at the latest issues on Jira and saw this. He was aware that we were going to send this as well, but he saw this, we send this issue and marked it as done. And then he realized that there must be something wrong with this issue. So he adds us as a responder to the alert. So we got paged as well, me and my friend. So we, 2 people, we worked on the issue. So we got paged as well. So we were on board, talking on Slack, if what might have happened. And after 10 minutes of debugging, evaluating, how can we at least bring this back to the steady state? Basically, we didn't have really an emergency backup plan at that moment, and we also couldn't find out what was wrong. So what we did is to basically select the alert and create a new incident from that alert. And this page is 5 more people, and bring in the incident response team. So obviously, in our incident response team, mostly it's senior engineers. And so we started looking at the code. And at that moment, one of the engineers suggested that we could disable one of the clusters in Elasticsearch. And basically, we had two clusters for Elasticsearch at the time, and we had this option on the administrative page that we could just disable one of the clusters, and all the load goes to one cluster. And we did that. It actually worked, and we had no idea why. It stopped. Well, that is also you should be your first priority during incidents. Basically, stop the bleeding first. Like, don't try to understand what is causing this. If you can, just stop the bleeding first. And that actually stopped the bleeding, but we had some inconsistencies already happened. So at that moment, because we stopped one of the clusters, like more load started going to another cluster, and we started getting like alerts from Amazon CloudWatch on like CPU usage increase in the Elastic cluster. But we know that it's normal because we disabled it, but it was able to handle it, so we didn't really need to do anything. What we did is only select the alert, also associate the alert with the incident, so we have everything on the same place. So after a lot of debugging, long story short, we spent, I think, an hour on like trying to figure out what was wrong and check like code difference. And our co-founder was able to spot a bug. Basically, we weren't thinking about how like asynchronous nature of Elasticsearch. We were basically reading from cluster 1 and writing from cluster 2, and that messed up everything. We had a lot of inconsistencies just because of that. So we fixed the code, and at that moment, again, we still have inconsistencies. So even though this didn't really affect the alerting flow, people still get their notifications and everything working fine, but they see the wrong thing on UI, that basically gives the impression that it's like everything is down. So it's kind of bad view. So it took us, I think, 5 hours or more to run the data synchronous job, basically load everything again to Elasticsearch, all the alerting data, 5 hours. At 2 a.m., we were finally done, bringing the system back to the same spot. So we had a lot of learnings, and we did some good things and bad things during the incident. So now I'm gonna share 4 key takeaways on like what we did right and what did we wrong, and how can we make this better. So the remaining of the presentation, I'm going to talk about basically 4 main things. So I'm going to talk about actionable alerts, the importance of actionable alerts. Don't worry, I'm going to explain now after the slide what actionable alert means. So we're going to talk about training, transparency, and finally we're going to talk about analysis and learning. And there are going to be like subtitles, subsections under each of these key takeaways. So my first key takeaway towards a healthy on-call culture is to have actionable alerts. So I define actionable alerts as alerts that really mean something, like they are there for a reason, and alerts tell you like how to start investigating the issue and hopefully how to start solving the issue. And basically they give you some context. And actionable alerts provide context and guidance to reduce mean time to resolve as well as stress. So I have 3 things as part of actionable alerts, and the first one is automated alerting. So in our case, the first alert came from customer success team and basically from our customers, and that is not ideal, obviously. And we try to catch like everything through automated alerting, but it's not going to happen all the time. That happens, but your goal is to like catch the alert before the customer impact. What we did right maybe was to be able to group the alerts from Amazon CloudWatch under the same incident. So we have, like, obviously we might have some additional alerts at the same time, but because we were able to group the alerts, that gives the incident response team a better view on how things are going. So the second one is to have clear escalation paths. So using a tool like Opsgenie solves this problem, and on-call engineer, in our case, was automatically alerted from the alerting team. And then he was able to also add us as a responder, and we automatically get called using our preferred notification channels. It can be SMS messages, it can be regular calls. It depends on the people. And also, in this case, we didn't really need it, but we had some backup, like in case we couldn't reach the on-call person, we had a senior engineer backup, so after 2 minutes, Opsgenie was automatically gonna call the backup engineer. So that is very important because something can happen, and it definitely helps for on-call engineer to know that there is gonna be someone else that can take care of the alert if he or she is not available. And we were also bringing in the incident response team with just creating the incident. It pages all those people. So those were already before. We worked on this before, so that was nice. And the last thing is the one-click actions and guides. So what I mean by this is that we didn't really have these back then, but it definitely helps if you have actions that you can use to automate. For example, on the alert, if you have actions like bring me the logs from 5 minutes from this for this service, and it attaches back logs to the alert, or just say restart an EC2 instance, or if you are failing to handle the load, just one-click action on the alert and add another EC2 instance to your load balancer. These kind of stuff. Automating these kind of stuff on alerts definitely helps because during stressful situations, people tend to get nervous and they tend to make mistakes. So automating these things help a lot. And also having runbooks. Runbooks basically are step-by-step guides on how to start investigating the issue, what to do next. Again, during stressful situations, if you have on the alerts, step-by-step instructions, check this first. If you cannot do this kind of instructions. This definitely help reduce the stress and give confidence. So my second key takeaway is on the importance of training. Obviously, as we train our people, they will gain more confidence, and it will become less stressful for them. So this brings us to onboarding. I think this is very important, and we often fail to put more people in on the on-call schedules. We often just keep our most senior people in the on-call schedule, but that is not just bad for senior people, but that is also bad for junior people because now they can't learn the experience of dealing with production. That is all important for them as well as important for senior engineers to have some backup coming in. So for example, for us, after 3 months, we start training our, not junior, but basically not on-call experience people with no on-call experience people, and give them access to right tools, train them, and then onboard them, and they start first taking on-call responsibilities during business hours. And we also use something called shadowing. If you are familiar with the term, basically you put a senior, basically experienced on-call engineer with a junior on-call engineer at the same time. So they get the alerts at the same time, they start working in the issue. And this way you can, on-call engineer, the new on-call engineer gets some experience on hand, and it will be a lot safer, a lot less stressful for the new on-call engineer, a lot better experience. This is something we didn't do at the time. We didn't have game days. Basically, game days are becoming an industry standard. Game days are basically rehearsals. Basically, you come up with a scenario and try to gather the team and basically try to experience the same thing when an incident occurs. And obviously, this kind of training helps a lot during incidents because we already done something similar before. And especially during big incidents, maybe not like this one, because in this one, we could only just bring in 5 people, and they already knew alerting domain, and it was easy for them to solve, and it was only affecting alerting. But if you have this one service that provides services to other services in a microservice architecture, for example, and then that means sometimes you are going to need people from different teams. And in this case, you have to have plans ahead, you have to have specific roles for people, incident commander, for example, should lead the incident response and give people strict instructions on how to do, what to do when, and be very specific on the intention. And you have to have roles like subject matter experts, basically our engineers, scribe maybe to write what is happening at what time, keeping the timeline of things. Obviously, you can automate some of these, but still, it's kind of a mess during incidents. So it helps to have someone responsible for these things. So the third item in my list is transparency. So transparency is obviously critical for a company in many aspects, but also I think it's a must for on-call. And basically, it makes on-call more humane. So we have this value that is like straight bold, open company, no bullshit, in Atlassian. And we actually try to live this value. And as part of basically this mentality, we opened our Ops handbook, basically stating how we do on-call, how we do incident response within the team. It is available under Atlassian.com. If you just Google it, Atlassian Ops handbook, you will see it. So as Atlassian's opportunity team, we also have our internal documents for on-call. And in those documents, we state like what we expect from on-call people as well as what we don't expect. That is very important. And also we have like things like how to switch shifts temporarily, like some suggestions. Teams can decide these things by themselves, but also it helps to have some sort of guidance on these things. And even for example, flexibility of working from home after an incident, like you had an incident during night, and you want to know like if it is okay for me to come like at noon or not. And if it is written, it makes it a lot safer, a lot like easy for people to make the judgment without any fear. And nowadays we like even see some companies going even further with transparency. Some companies are just broadcasting their incident response live on YouTube. There are like endless things you can do to make things more transparent and basically try to be clear on most important thing, what you expect from on-call and what you don't expect. So when it comes to transparency, status page updates are very important. And in our case, the creation of the incident automatically triggered the status page update. So we already had this status page update. But the following updates were a bit late, so that was one of the action items. Basically, give updates more frequent in our case. And also, we often when we think about status page updates, we often think about only external stakeholders, basically our end users. But it's not just that. We also should think about our internal stakeholders. What I mean by internal stakeholders, it could be other services that depends on our service, or it could be management, because sometimes they are curious on what is happening, at what stage we are in during solving the problem. You don't want your CEO to come in to talk and what are you guys doing, solve this problem fast, right? And if you give regular updates, definitely helps. And also, especially the customer success team needs to keep informed, because there are going to be tons of questions coming from your users to customer service team, and you don't want them to just go to Slack and have no answers on what is happening. So especially automating these definitely helps. In our case, everything we do on the incident, adding a note, is visible to our customer success team. So final one in my list is about analyzing and learning from each incident. Because if you don't analyze incident, you don't learn from incident, those are just failures. But if you analyze them, those are growth opportunities. So the first thing we should do is that record every detail, not just the data during incidents, not just who opened the incident, who acknowledged it, it knows everything, but also keep track of on-call schedule details, for example, like how long this person is taking on-call responsibilities, how many times we page this person during night, or how many times we get alerts from this service. These kind of details help give you some operational data, and then you can use this data to basically prioritize your issues, your reliability, especially your reliability issues, by looking at these. For example, if someone is taking a lot of on-call duties, you might want to say maybe just put another engineer and distribute the load a little bit. But without any data, without tracking these, you wouldn't have this opportunity. Then we should be writing our postmortems. Basically, postmortems are, you guys know, but still there might be some people. So postmortems are detailed documentations on what happened, when they happened, and also how can we make this better. And we should be writing these as soon as possible. Sometimes we wait like a couple of weeks. That's not gonna work. I think I'm not sure where I read it, but I think like it should be at most 4 days. So basically, try to do it as soon as possible after you solve the problem and write your postmortem. And if possible, especially if it's a big incident, make this available to your customers. And while doing that, we often talk about blameless, should be blameless, right? It is, during stressful situations, it is always tempting to like try to find a scapegoat and, name people and, this person caused this incident. But basically this doesn't help anyone, and this makes things a lot worse. For example, people might start hiding things because they see that, people are pointing fingers, and also basically at some point they don't want to take any risks, because what I see basically, most incidents comes from like even most of the time senior people, because they take more risks, they do the like risky jobs, and basically it doesn't help. So don't blame people, and basically don't point fingers. And the last one I think is not regularly relevant, but I still would like to talk about this a little bit, because as we talked in the beginning, on-call isn't leisure time, so you cannot just think that it's part of the job because it's stressful enough. So you should have some sort of way to compensate for on-call, and it doesn't have to be like giving money for each alert. It can be different things, but for example, for some time we were giving like 1 day off after 5 days of on-call for our engineers. There might be different options. But for many countries, especially like laws are protecting basically on-call people, especially in Europe. In Germany, for example, you wouldn't call people outside of work and expect them to work. it's gonna be a problem. But again, like in US, for example, there is no law. Some companies just think that it's part of the job. But it always helps, because they are putting their time off. Again, as we talked in the beginning, it is causing them stress even if there is no alert. So try to find a way to compensate for on-call. Hopefully give some money, but again, it's okay if you don't give any money, but still find a way to compensate for on-call. So we started this talk talking about how DevOps changed, how we do on-call, and how we deal with incidents. And we talked about the benefits of putting developers on call, giving developers more responsibilities on operations. And parallel to my learning, we talked about these 4 key takeaways. And with the first one, we talked about actionable alerts. As part of actionable alerts, we talked about automating alerts, getting the alerts before customer impact, constructing proper escalation paths, and we talked about leveraging one-click actions, as well as having runbooks and guides to start, they will tell us how to start investigating the issue. Then we talked about training. As part of training, we talked about onboarding new people in, distributing the load all the time. And we talked about having game days, basically practicing incident response before they actually happen. And then we talked about transparency. So as part of transparency, I shared that we have this open incident handbook, and you should have. I'm not saying everyone should open their incident response documents, but at least have them, make them available within your company, and tell your people that what you expect and what you don't expect from your people, from your on-call people, and also during incidents share regular status updates both with internal and external stakeholders. And finally, we talked about analysis and learning, and it starts with obviously collecting operational data related with on-call and incident response, the data during incidents as well. And then we talked about postmortems. We talked about not blaming people and writing postmortems as soon as possible. And finally, we talked about compensating on-call. So as I told you before, on-call is stressful. By definition, it's like no matter what you do, it will lead to some stress for your people. And sometimes it will lead to burnout. But I think applying these 4 principles will definitely drive good results in making on-call better for your company, for your organization. And the thing is, we should be careful about, like, we should put our people first. And remember, the less stressful on-call is, the healthier your teams are. So basically, they can focus on what really matters, and they can bring the best of themselves every day to work. Thank you very much. If you have any questions. Sure. Yep.
How do you realize that you will not? Oh, thank you. You realize that you will not solve the issue anytime soon.
Yep.
How do you communicate to your upper management and to the clients?
Okay. So in our case, we have different schedules. Like this person on call, we have also, for example, let's say ops team. We have ops team, let's say, and ops team member gets called during night at 2 a.m. And we also have a backup schedule. So in case that the on-call engineer can solve the problem, and in backup schedules, we usually have senior people. We don't want to alert junior people again and again, right? So we have probably like the most senior people in that can know the problem. And then like he can just click one button and say escalate to next and bring in, like, call the next person on call without knowing who he is or who she is. So that is, I think, the best option, because you are not like asking for a favor from a friend. Basically, you couldn't solve it, and you should have necessary experience during day before actually taking night on-call responsibility. That is what we do, for example. And in case of, like, there's a real big incident, like you called the senior engineer and you still couldn't solve it, and it is perfectly fine to just bring in incident response team and page everyone. And those are the things that should be specified in the documentations. Like, if you can't solve the problem in, let's say, 10 minutes, basically do this and call the incident response team, because you are basically losing money, you are losing uptime. So basically, that is what we do. Okay, so basically doing a lot of technical stuff, but basically for marketing. And so I go to a lot of conferences, talk about things like on-call, incident response, serverless sometimes. I'm also very interested in AWS. And also I write a lot of content on incident response. I'm writing like a lot of ebooks on these best practices. So I have like half of the ebooks, like 5 or 6 ebooks in Opsgenius, for example, resources page come from me. And I write a lot of blog posts for, I don't know, famous, let's say, blogs as well. I don't write for the last, like, I've been in this role for 1.5 years now. And before this, I worked as a software engineer like for 3 or 4 years and 1.5 years in Opsgenius. So transitioning to this role basically after some time, and that also made me remote, so I wanted to move to a different city. So basically I don't do any production code right now. I only write sample apps and tutorials for our developers that use basically our APIs and our platform. But mostly I do conferences, meetups, and I also organize a lot of events. Yeah, sure. No more questions? I'm surprised no one is asking about Jira, and my answer is I don't know yet. It's going strong for cloud. That's all I know. Okay, thank you very much.